Thank you very much indeed, Sam. It's just a huge pleasure to be here. I think I came to one of the meetings where you were sort of testing whether low-carbon Oxford North could happen and talked about what we were doing in West Oxford. So it's just brilliant to be here sort of 2 or 3 years in and seeing all of the interest in the sort of growing number of people who are taking part. I'm going to be talking about how we're trying to move on from the work in West Oxford, the work in all of the individual communities in Oxfordshire, how we're trying to network all of that together so that we can really get people being using their time as efficiently as possible, because it's all everybody's spare time in their local communities, to make what people generally call a step change, if you don't mind me using a bit of jargon there, in Oxfordshire, so that we can really become an exemplar to geographies across the UK and even beyond the UK, because I really do think that we have the ingredients to do that here. So for those of you who I don't know very well and who may not have sat through any of my talks before, this was West Oxford in the summer of 2007. Where we had 10 days of not being able to get into and out of West Oxford very easily because of the floodwater. As you can see in this photograph, you could canoe on the Botley Road for that period of time. And that experience just really made people think in West Oxford about why that summer flood might have happened. And of course, we all know that you can't say that climate change caused that summer flood, but I think it just made people think maybe this is an outcome of climate change. And therefore, if I want to keep my community safe, if I want my children to experience a different future, I need to do something about that. And that's the period after which that Low Carbon West Oxford started work, and then from that developed West Oxford Community Renewables, that developed solar PV on a lot of buildings in West Oxford. The City Council picked up on that in a fantastically wonderful way, where they didn't go, oh, we'll start doing that for you as a council. They said, the community has a really great idea, how can we support you? And at that point we started working with Low Carbon Oxford North, Low Carbon South Oxford and others across the city. And I think we're starting to see some progress. As West Oxford, one of the projects that we did was to put 100 kilowatts of solar PV on Matthew Arnold School. That was grant funded by DEC, so that predated Low Carbon Oxford North, developing Oxford North Community Renewables and raising the money totally as share equity. West Oxford had put out a share offer before this, but it really was a pioneer prototypey sort of thing, and you know, we tested it anyway. This indeed is part of the Charwell School project, and so we were developing in the city a method of working whereby the community could raise share equity from neighbours collectively to fund renewable energy projects like this that would then make an income, both from the sale of the electricity and from the feed-in tariff payments, which could then be donated into a charity in the community for doing work across the community to involve as many people as possible in low carbon living projects, transport projects, food projects, and on we go. And that model of reinvesting the money we think is fantastically important. It's about getting core funding into communities that they have control over, which gives them some resilience, which means that they're not having to put huge amounts of time all the time into grant applications. It means that the economic benefit of developing those renewable energy projects is kept in the community and can be used to create further economic development benefits about helping people to reduce their energy and therefore reduce their energy bills and therefore have a less pressured lifestyle economically. So all of that going together and feeding back into each other we think is really important. So how do we move on from the experience of West Oxford and North Oxford? You may or may not know that in the city and the county we've had great leadership from the City Council and the County Council in terms of this sort of work. And for the last 10 years or so we've had council-supported work going on to develop low-carbon community groups through the Community Action Group network. And that means that when West Oxford started thinking about developing the low carbon hub to be there to help lots more communities do that sort of work, we already had a set of active low carbon groups in the county. We think we've got somewhere between 50 and 60 low carbon groups in the county. And so what West Oxford decided to do with some grant funding that it got through the City Council was to set up the Low Carbon Hub as a social enterprise that would be there to gather all of the knowledge, help to get funding in at scale, to help all of those community groups develop the sorts of projects that Low Carbon Oxford North has been doing. And the aspiration is that we're working with 20 around about 20 closely at the moment. We managed over time to work with all of the current between 50 and 60. But just as with Low Carbon Oxford North, you have a 500 membership for Low Carbon Oxford North and a 7,500 population in Oxford North. So in the county, we have between 50 and 60 active communities, and we know that we've got over 300 communities, geographic communities, if you're taking the parish boundaries as your unit. And so there's a lot of work we've got to do to involve all of those communities. And we want them all to be doing the same range of work as you've been thinking about in Oxford North, so that we're looking at bog standard insulation, changing light bulbs, although maybe we should have an LED there now, I think, as well as and thermal imaging, as you've been doing, as well as the renewable energy projects that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. We call that, in the Low Carbon Hub, we call that powering up and powering down. And we think that if we're going to reach the government targets, a bit as Tim was saying earlier, we cannot expect national and international politics to solve the problem of climate change for us. Politicians are just too short-term, they're too worried about the next election, they're too involved in a party machine, quite frankly. The only way we're going to get real change happening here is if we can get the grassroots, if we can get the populations of local areas working together and making the changes using whatever comes out of national and international government, yes, but also inventing the solutions ourselves, not waiting for government to do that for us. In Oxfordshire, if we're going to hit our targets, we need a huge percentage of our population to be working on these things, working through things like the Low Carbon Living Programme. So you have 8,000 households in North Oxford. In Oxfordshire, we've got 258,000 households. I don't know how many businesses you have in North Oxford, but in Oxfordshire, we've got 3,500 VAT-registered businesses. And that obviously doesn't include a huge number of SMEs who don't, or small enterprises who don't have to register for VAT. We have to get all of those units of activity active to make the deep changes that we need to make if we're going to reach those targets. I think we can do it, but I think that we need to share very effectively the good ways of doing things, the effective ways of doing things. We can't leave it to each individual community to invent those solutions on their own. And one of the great things that I see happening at the moment, which tells me that we've got an effective network in Oxfordshire, are things like Lucy, who is active in Ensham, coming to do a job for Oxford North, which I just think is a fantastic thing to happen. Rebecca, who's active in Oxford North, has been doing some work with the Low Carbon Hub. I'm interviewing for a full-time community energy project manager at the Low Carbon Hub tomorrow, and all of the candidates I'm interviewing are active in their communities, and they're all different communities. One of the highlight moments of my life was when we had a Green Deal dialogue meeting with Low Carbon Oxford, and we went round the table and pretty much everyone introduced themselves as their professional capacity and their community. That's really unprecedented, and it shows me that we are managing to build something here in Oxfordshire that could really make a difference and is already making a difference. We need to talk to each other about the impact that we're having. We need to be confident that we are having a positive impact. And one of the ways that the Low Carbon Hub wants to do that, although this has been in development for quite a long time and we keep on being taken away from finishing it and launching it by trying to do things, is the People's Power Station. We think that it's very important to be thinking about powering down energy efficiency as part of a power station. If we want to make the impact that we need to make, how do we join together to demonstrate that impact? And we want to do that through what we've called the People's Power Station. The catalyst for that, for the idea, was that at the point that we were thinking about it, we were going to be losing the Didcot A power station in about 3 years from the time that we were thinking about it. Didcot A power station has already closed. For those of you who may have missed it, it was amazing how little news it got. And in some ways that's sort of a good thing because it was a coal-fired power station. Some people don't like the cooling towers. I think they're pretty beautiful personally. They're going to go at some time over the next few years. But the other thing that it means, as well as whether or not we lose a landmark, whether or not it should have closed, whether or not we agree with coal-fired power stations. One of the impacts on Oxfordshire is that our energy is less secure than it was. And okay, you might say, well, that's fine because as the UK, we're really good at providing ourselves with energy. So why does it matter? Well, one reason it matters is because about 18 months ago, you may again have missed it on the news, David Cameron, as our Prime Minister, actually felt it necessary to go onto the television and announce that the UK had successfully negotiated a gas contract with Norway, because we're now importing a large slice of our gas. We are moving into a period in the UK that we've never been in before, where we will be importing most of our energy. And I think quite apart from climate change arguments, that's an issue for us. The other thing, of course, is that there were jobs associated with the Didcot A power station. And in terms of the economy of Oxfordshire, maybe a few hundred jobs doesn't matter that much. But in current economic circumstances, it seems to me that any job matters. And if we get this powering down and powering up going locally, we'll be making local jobs. If we can get that income coming into the community, we will be making local jobs, such as the part-time one that Lucy has. And that's really important to do. The other thing, of course, is if we all have to keep on buying energy, it's much better that we buy it locally and keep the economic development benefits of that locally than buying it from a big company who then salts all of its profits away in some organisation somewhere else and avoids paying corporation tax. You know, we're talking here about doing something about climate change, yes, but also doing something very healthy long-term for our local economy. And so we thought linking the People's Power Station with the Didcot A closure was actually quite a powerful thing to do. Oh, powerful, sorry, I just realised I'd... Horrible pun there. What I'm going to do is take you through some screenshots of the People's Power Station. So this is not the full web version. And I'd like to, and in doing that, just put out to Low Carbon Oxford North that they might be a pioneer community in helping us to populate the People's Power Station and really get it going. It'd be fantastic if you could. So what we're doing, this is meant to be an Oxfordshire landscape with the white horse there, lots of sheep, cattle. I think that's an oast house. I'm not quite sure we've got oast house in Oxfordshire, but there we go. And a cooling tower and the battery there. And what we want to do is fill that battery so that we get lots and lots of energy radiating out from it. So we talk about our targets, and we start with a grey sky and a big cloud. Back in 2005, that's our baseline year. What renewable energy did we have, and how much, what did we know about the carbon emissions that we were saving? And so this battery is showing that for target by 2020 for powering up, how many gigawatt hours we want to be generating by then, and how many gigawatt hours we want to be saving through energy efficiency or powering down. And the work that we did with Oxford University suggested that if we meet those targets, which are actually government targets for 2020, would you believe? If we meet those targets, we will have replaced the need for the Didcot A power station. Now, there's all sorts of discussion to have about that, because actually, by the time it finished generating, Didcot A was not generating as much electricity as it could have been. Its capacity was actually larger than that. But when you take the last few years of operation of Didcot A, that's what we can do. We're already on the way. And this is quite an old picture now. We know that there are some big renewable energy projects that have been installed since this screenshot was taken. And we're making inroads into our powering down, and we are managing to produce renewable energy. We get that data at the moment in this first phase of the People's Power Station from two sources. We get the powering down data from national energy data sets, that the government produces. And we get the renewable energy data from quarterly updates of the feed-in tariff register and the renewables obligation register. So we can update our renewable energy quarterly at the moment, and our energy reduction annually. And that annual data set has therefore a bit of a lag time on it. We have ambitions for the next stage of the People's Power Station to automate it. So we're getting real data in from renewable energy projects that are registered with us, so we can show a real time what community energy is generating in Oxfordshire, which we think would be very exciting. And then clearly, if we hit our targets, we've filled both sides of the battery, and on we're going, and it's fantastic. The study that we did, and what underpins the renewable energy side of the People's Power Station, is a study, as I say, that we did with the Energy and Power Research Group of Oxford University, which tried to identify the technical potential for renewable energy that we have in the county. And the pie chart that resulted from that is as you see. And I think what you can see from that is that in the county, by far the majority of our renewable energy potential is sources other than wind. We have an awful lot of arisings from agricultural activity that we're not fully using, or using much in the county at all. We do have two big anaerobic digesters, one at Cassington that's been going for a few years now, and one that's just been built at Wallingford. Both 2 megawatts in capacity, and they take local food waste and make energy out of that, which is a jolly good thing to happen if we are all going to be throwing away as much food waste as we do. And the other sort of slightly surprising thing for me was the amount of biomass we have in the county. The sort of western and northern part of the county is actually quite denuded of trees, and it's one of the least wooded areas in Europe. But the south and east of the county is quite heavily wooded, and there's a huge potential for biomass energy there. And we're not managing much of that woodland.
Sorry, or at least I can't read the headings back here.
Okay, solar, hydro is that little red streak there, anaerobic digestion, biomass, wind. Okay.
You don't have anything for solar hot water?
No, that's because this is electricity rather than...
Well, it doesn't say it just says energy.
Sorry, it should. Sorry. This just gives a sort of sense of that's what Didcot A was doing at closure, and if we're successful with the People's Power Station powering up, that's what we can replace. And then the rest of that can be done by energy efficiency. We've mapped that pie chart that I showed you so that we can see where in the county our technical potential is. That shows the anaerobic digestion in terms of agricultural arisings. And the reason for that quite large resolution on the map is that DEFRA doesn't release agricultural data on a very fine grain because it doesn't want the data to be linked with individual farmers. I wish it did personally, because then we could target the ones to develop anaerobic digestion. But anyway, that's the reason for the scale. That's the biomass potential, and then you can see here the wind potential is rather less. And that's partly to do with the resource, because we're a sort of landlocked county in the middle of the country. But it's also to do with the numbers of air installations we have around, and the numbers of radar installations that we have, which means that it's difficult to develop wind because you have an impact on the radar. So that's the People's Power Station. That's the aspiration, to get everybody involved and everybody feeding into the People's Power Station. But we need mechanisms to help people do that. And that's another thing that the Low Carbon Hub is working on. So this shows the way that we're developing the structure of the Low Carbon Hub to allow us to get big investment in at scale to help us do more and more and more of these types of projects. And so on the left here, we have the original social enterprise that we set up, which is a community interest company. It's a bit like the double structure of low carbon Oxford North, or Oxford North, but we don't have a charity and an IPS. We have a community interest company and an IPS. And that's because we want to do things with communities. We're not the end sort of charity working with individual householders. We've got one company, the community interest company, which is a services company to work with communities. And then we have the BENCOM, which is about developing renewable energy projects, the sort of capital development projects. And so what we want to do through the Low Carbon Hub KIC, the services bit, is to help communities to develop renewable energy projects. That's what we call our Hub Helped work. We want to help communities to get investment into powering down, and that's what we call Community Green Deal Plus. And we also want to work with the CAG network to get more communities mobilised, and that's our community engagement work. And then on the other side of the structure, we have a BenCom where we raise shareholder investment and other forms of investment, just as you would into Encore. And then we develop projects underneath that in special purpose vehicles. And we develop those projects through the IPS when either the community, local to that project, has invited us in to do that for them because they don't feel they have the capacity, or where there's a project and no obvious local community to develop that project. So we want to take care that we're doing things where it's necessary for the hub to take action rather than because we're there and sort of taking over, because we think that's not a healthy way of approaching life. This was our first renewable energy project at Ensham, solar PV on the village hall, and also a couple of small arrays at the local Catholic church. And given that Ensham is in the constituency of David Cameron, he did come along and say a few nice words there. There you go, that's us with David Cameron. But the point about that project is that Ensham Green Tea asked us to develop that with them, so because they felt that their time was best spent on all of that work, engaging households and working with local population, rather than on developing the renewable energy project and then managing the renewable energy project. And so we developed that and raised the money for it, and we share the surplus with Ensham, so they do get some benefit from having done that with us. The other way we work with renewable energy projects is by helping communities to get their projects investment ready and then to raise the money. And Osney Lock Hydro is our first example of that. It is a West Oxford project, so you would think that there would be capacity in the community of West Oxford to do that project. And I have to be a little bit careful here because I am a director of Osney Lock Hydro as well as all the other things I do. But it's also true that West Oxford got to a point with this project where they'd used all of the resources available to them, and they just needed a bit of help to get over the line and get the project out. And so the hub was able to step in and say, yep, we can help you do that. We can put a little bit of money in, we can put some time in. Here's the financial model that we've developed for our projects to help you know whether that project is going to be viable, and to work out what the best way of financing it would be. And that just helped to get the project done. So that project is owned, operated by the local community, but just a little bit of injection of help from the hub has helped it to happen. And as Sam said, and this is a computer-aided image of what the project should look like once it's finished. And you can see the sort of power of water that comes through the weir that it's on. If anybody knows the towpath, this is the main towpath with Osney Lock here and the Lock house. And this is what's called Weir B. And this is where you go over the footbridge, and there's normally sort of huge stream of water powering over there. Actually, that weir takes less of the flow. This weir, would you believe, takes 50% of the water that goes through the city, which is why that's a good place for the hydro scheme to be. So we got to the point where we had done all of the project development work. We knew we had a viable project. The Low Carbon Hub has helped us to understand the financials around quite a complex project. The hub helped on the final marketing materials, the share offer document, the website, all of the materials that went with launching the share offer, and also helped with getting the share offer out to networks that the hub is involved in. So the power of that networking, I think, is really key. So you don't get bored, here's another view of it. And that share offer was put out with 5 weeks to raise the money, because the Environment Agency are replacing the gates, or replacing Weir B. And I won't bore you with why, but it meant that we had to hit a date by which we were starting to build, otherwise we would lose the project. And just going through the whole planning process took almost a year, and it just took ages to get stuff done. It left us with a 5-week window to raise the money. And so what was decided was that the target for that share offer would be £250,000, which we thought was steep in 5 weeks. Very, very nervous, very worried about that, with a £350,000 loan from the Charity Bank, which is a bank specifically there to help communities do things that other banks won't fund. And without that, we wouldn't have had the confidence to put the offer out. And what was just amazing was that the initial target of £250,000 was raised in 6 days. And that was no press release, no launch, no big public meeting. All we did for the first week was just get it out to the networks of people that we already knew were interested in Oxfordshire. And so when it came to the Monday following the putting up of the website with huge trepidation, and we'd already got pledges, and indeed not just pledges, we had cheques flooding in through the debtor box. We actually had to stop the press release that we had scheduled for that Monday because it was old news. We'd actually gone beyond the limit, and we had to make some quick decisions about what we should do. Having set up a share offer on the basis of the 250 and the 350, what should we now do? And so the decision was that, okay, let's just take any target off and see how much we can raise. And so by the time that we got to the 7th of May, which was the end of our 5 weeks, we'd raised £550,000, which is just astonishing. And we could have gone on, actually. We could have, we don't think that it wasn't petering out in any sort of way. And so what we've gone on to from that amazing happening is to start mapping where that shareholder investment is coming from. And we think that that's a method that we could do if communities were willing to share anonymised data, just postcode data with us. We could do for the other share offers that we've had in the county to start getting a real sense of where people are who are investing. Because what happened with Osney Lock Hydro, and we'd like to know how normal that would be, is that over 60% of the £550,000 came from within a mile of the site. So that's local. And it's local in a city like Oxford, so a mile actually goes quite a long way into a big population. But that's a very interesting thing to have happened. It would be very interesting to look at that alongside Oxford North, alongside the Westmill Wind Farm and Solar Park, alongside other community share offers that we know about in other parts of the country. Just under 90% of the total amount came from Oxfordshire. And then we had outliers like somebody's mum up in Glasgow. But it just does give you a sense. And I think one of the things that people were sort of worried about from the questions that we've had coming back to us afterwards was very clearly that it would be a few rich people and a few big businesses who would put most of the money in. And actually what we find is that over 60% comes from within a mile. There's only one business that has taken a shareholding, and that's a relevant business that we actually want to do that. And the average, the mode, that's right, isn't it? The most often that you get a particular number. The mode of those shareholdings is £500, which was the lowest limit. So you know, I do feel that we can say from that the response to the Osney Lock Hydro share offer was local. It really is community investment for community benefit. And that's the sort of phenomenon that we want to get happening in all of those 300 communities in the county. And if we're right that over 60% of that comes from such a local community, then I don't think we should have any particular sense that we've somehow exhausted the potential by the share offers that we've already done. The other phenomenon that we haven't looked at and analysed in any great detail yet is how many of those shareholdings were repeat investments. We know from just anecdotally from the sorts of inquiries that we were getting from people that there are repeat investors in there. We know that this is becoming a normal very well developed by communities that have a lot of capacity, and they've been carefully verified by professionals. And I think, and one of the reasons that the low carbon hub we think needs to be there is that as we repeat these things going out, they have to be done to that quality. Otherwise we'll lose the trust in the repeat investors. And the other thing that makes me think that repeat investment is becoming a phenomenon is that it just so happened, very luckily for us I think, that on the first Saturday that our share offer was out, i.e. before we had planned our press release, the Westmill wind farm had its AGM, and they allowed us 2 minutes on their platform to raise awareness of the share offer amongst the attendees of their AGM. And it was amazing that the people there obviously reacted absolutely instantaneously. We got a flood of pledges onto the website and follow-up checks from that. All from people involved in Westmill who are local. It wasn't people involved in Westmill who are not local. But that suggests to me that there is the possibility here of developing a community of investors who like what we're offering for all sorts of reasons. And another thing that we want to do is follow up with all of those people with a survey to find out exactly why, what their motivations were. So that's the sort of sharing that we think is necessary to happen across the communities in Oxfordshire if we're going to have the impact that we want to have. The other thing that we can do as the low carbon hub, working with communities, is to bring communities together around a particular technology and get a particular type of technology developed, you know, sort of targeted in a way. And that's what we've done with microhydro. This is a map, would you believe, of the River Thames. So this is, and this is Oxfordshire, so this is not the Thames all the way to London or all the way to its source. This is where it hits the boundary of Oxfordshire, and this is where it leaves Oxfordshire. And this is the Charwell just going up there because we happen to have a project at Kirtlington. So what we did about 15 months ago, I suppose, we held a couple of workshops to gather together the communities that we knew about who were working on microhydro schemes, to find out how they were getting on, what their barriers were, what their needs were. And one of the things that we found by doing those workshops was that there were unclaimed locks along the River Thames. So we mapped all the locks along the River Thames in Oxfordshire. We said, okay, which of these is that suitable for hydro or not? Yes, no. Okay, not, fine, we'll forget about that. We had an expert there helping us, obviously. Okay, next one. Yep, that's suitable for hydro. Oh, but I know the local landowner's developing a hydro scheme there. Oh, well, fine. That's good. Let's move on to the next one. Next one. Oh, that's great. That's really got a good head. Lots of capacity there. But no community's doing anything about it yet. So what we've got from that is that we've gathered the communities who were working on hydro, such as the one at Osney, Goring, Abingdon, Kirtlington. We've got communities working on locks who weren't working on them before. So Godstow, Radcott, Shifford, Days. And we're making a relationship with the Environment Agency for them to say, okay, we understand what it is for communities to develop micro hydro schemes. It's mainly on our land. We know how to, we know what the processes are that we need to go through to permit those, to get them through our estates and assets managers, to deal with procurement, blah. I won't go through the headaches that we've had with Osney Lock Hydro to bring that first community-owned hydro project to fruition. But again, that's the sort of knowledge that we can share among communities and get some really big projects happening that generate most of their electricity in the winter when our solar projects are generating in the summer. And really, again, get some big investment coming back into communities that we can use to focus on the hard work that is powering down. And goodness me, it is hard work. This is another hub pilot project where we're working with the City Council to do energy assessments of houses in Barton that are unimproved system-built houses and therefore very cold and very power-hungry. And we're trying to work out how we can use the new energy company obligation to get those houses fitted with external wall insulation for as little cost to anybody other than the energy companies as possible. We started off with the idea that ECO would fund the whole of this, and we're coming to the very sad conclusion that it probably doesn't, which I think is an absolute disgrace, personally, if I'm allowed to say that in my personal capacity. So that work on that pilot is still going on, and it's tortuous, actually. It is absolutely tortuous trying to understand all the rules, trying to work with the energy companies and bring that project to fruition when what we're trying to do is aggregate tens, sort of between 50 and 100 owner-occupiers who all have to agree to what we're doing and have to trust that we're going to somehow bring this process to a conclusion whereby they can get the work done to their house. Barton is an area of multiple deprivation, which is in the 15% most deprived areas in the whole country. There are lots of people there who own their houses, who bought them from the City Council and who didn't improve them when they bought them. And we know that there are a lot of people, from working with the local councillor, there are a lot of people in Barton who are switching off their heating because they can't afford it. And ECO looks as if it might not fund the whole of external wall insulation, which would make that situation a lot better. So wherever Tim is, we do need to get Nicola here to talk to her about these issues. But that's the sort of project, again, we can find out about these processes, we can find out about the rules and regulation, we can work with people like Iraj, who's sitting there, who knows all about the Green Deal, because he's now a Green Deal advice organisation, and who is fairly local to Oxford North too, who knows about domestic Green Deal and non-domestic Green Deal. And who can hopefully help us to work out how we put the funding together to help people like this. And it's not just an urban problem. In Oxfordshire, it's particularly a rural one as well, because we have many communities across the county who are off the gas network, therefore with oil heating, very old houses which have F&G ratings. And if you ever look in the property pages and follow up in the Oxford Times, you'll see how many rural properties are that bad in terms of their energy rating. And where large, old, uninsulated houses tend to get lived in by people who've had a big family and then end up being a single pensioner living in those properties. So there are swathes of fuel poverty around in the city and the county that it's sort of easy not to notice, and we sort of want to find a way through the Low Carbon Hub of dealing with that. If we can make Barton work, maybe we've got a model that we can repeat elsewhere, but it's bloody hard work, if I'm allowed to swear on camera. So that's the Low Carbon Hub, that's what we're trying to do. That's how we're trying to build on the work that you're pioneering here in Oxford North. But that's also how we're hoping to build a low carbon hub that then can come back in and help you with the things that you want to do, put communities together so that we're operating on a slightly bigger scale and able to do more things. So please go to the website and have a look at what's there. I'm sure you'll find it fascinating. It's www.lowcarbonhub.org, and you'll find all of this lovely advice, resources and services online. Thank you.